Coming up today on Locked On at Texas Tech, the latest on the Red Raider head coaching search and how NIL dollars impact transfer portal decisions. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Glad to have you along for the ride once again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts each day. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel Sportsbook is the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you as always. We've got some bigger picture perspectives to get into on today's episode. Some of that involving the swirling winds of the transfer portal, which are now like one of those money vacuums you see where dollar bills are flying and like tourists are trying to grab stuff. We'll get into that in just a moment. But first, let's hit the latest as far as in-house what's happening in Lubbock. We actually have some player transfer portal news to discuss as well with Robert Jennings, but I want to get to first, of course, the top of the program and the latest with Texas Tech's head coaching search. Chris, I've been hearing a lot here lately about expect some time to play out. There's not even necessarily, like a formal list, much less, finalists or front runners or things like that. So curious to hear your perspective this morning as we get started on where we are, not even quite a week removed, of course, from a change.
Yeah, Calvin, I think they have an idea of people they're going to talk to or go after. I think whether that's their preference, and I say they being the internal search committee, that's Kirby and Dusty and obviously Joey and Norrance are a part of that, and then obviously the search firm is offering help as well, and I think they've already talked to some people. I don't know to the extent. I don't think like anything has happened on campus. I think, but again, this is going to be pretty tight-lipped, and I think people are right to expect it to kind of play out for a while. I mean, I think early next week would be the absolute soonest you would have a head coach hired. Now, I could be off on that, but, as we sit here and talk, there are games being played tonight. There are, whether it be NCAA or NIT or whatever it is, there's games being played tomorrow and Friday and all those things. And then, if anybody you're wanting to talk to wins, I mean, it just kicks the can down the road. I've heard, the Billy Donovan stuff. I've heard, there's a lot of, the Mike Krzyzewski stuff, reaching out to potentially Kelvin Sampson's agent, University of Houston. I think though that there's a somewhere to meet when you're thinking about aiming really, really high here, and then I don't want to say realistic. But I mean, there's a sweet spot there to where, again, there's the right fit. There's the right fit that somebody that knows the sport and also kind of either has an intimate feel for this place or this city or this conference or something, or can surround themselves with those kinds of folks. I even wonder, because Jerome Tang, obviously a huge, name and all that. And I think he's about to get, paid big time as they're Kansas State's a 3 seed. I don't think he'll leave, but, you wonder about like that even dynamic about like, okay, who's the best assistant in the Big 12? Would they be ready? And what about like a guy like Norm Roberts at Kansas? I mean, I don't know. Been in the league for a long time. It was the interim over the weekend. I mean, so anyway, people are the Andy Kennedy stuff. I think there's legs to that. I think Chris Jans. I think there's potentially legs to that. I think Paul Mills, I think Grant McCaslin, I think Barrett Peary is still absolutely involved here. So, but we've, I don't gather Steve Alford is involved, and I think they do play tonight. I don't know if there's a ton of interest there. I think, years ago there would have been, but that's an NCAA tournament team. And I always hate pronouncing that state too, so I'm not even going to attempt it. He coaches at the University of, it's where, Reno and Las Vegas reside, and I never can hit the A right.
Nevada.
Yeah, there you go.
Nevada. I think
yeah, there you go. There you go. So, but where we land here, I'm not real sure. I just think that there's some pieces to the puzzle here, and I think it's going to take just a bit of time, which is tricky based on kind of what we're about to talk about, here in a bit, which is portal, roster, NIL, and all these kinds of dynamics. But you got to get the first piece right. And I think the first piece is who's in charge of this program, and then who is that person going to surround themselves with, and how good of a fit are these people, and then can they hit the ground running? And I'll just, as a side note here, I will tell you that, the announcement by Ole Miss and Chris Beard having been hired, there's some direct I think there's some crossover there. And what I mean by that is, obviously, he hires Brian Berg as an assistant. I think he's also trying to hire Al Pinkins. And I think Al Pinkins, would like to stay here. However, Al Pinkins can probably only wait for so long before, you see kind of what opportunities are available here before I've got to give Chris an answer. And he may have other things working there, but I think that's been widely reported in Oxford. And I just know, how Chris operated whenever he left here and took those guys on that plane, the one that Mark Adams didn't get on, and they all had pen to paper under contract like quickly. And then, so they couldn't, pivot and like go, you know what, give me some time. No, that's not. So I don't know. I'm just offering that up because I think that's important to note, because I think people like Al and, somebody like that would have potentially, been retained here, but may not have that opportunity for whoever the new coach is because of the timing.
Yeah. When I saw the Chris Beard news, all I could think to myself was, don't that beat all? Amazing to see transpire in such a short period of time. Chris, before we get to
Cowan,
the player
come
aspect
on.
of it, I was just taken aback. It's just a colloquial expression of being astonished at something transpiring. I really wonder when you're having – I didn't know if anybody talked to anybody, like back channel or what, but you're saying, maybe there has been a conversation here or there, no formal interview, I guess. How does that actually work, though? Or is this like a call to a coach? Is it a call to a coach's agent? Is it a call to a coach's handler or shoe representative?
It could
how
be.
Does that, or what does that conversation actually look like?
It could be all the above. I think you can work through an agent. If a coach has an agent, I think the search firm can help connect some dots there. I think that a lot of this stuff, and I say that, they may have gone to a remote location. They could have met somebody in Abilene or Dallas or Albuquerque or who the heck knows. Or you could just hop on, there you go, Plainview, Texas, and maybe sat down and had an Egg McMuffin at a McDonald's, and then look like a dumbass when you show the receipt, later on down the road. Yeah, he looked really funny.
Yes.
All's well that ends well. Or you can hop on a medium like we're doing right now and Zoom and kind of get with folks that way, and kind of that way there is no travel and. It kind of a preliminary type conversation. I mean, that all that is, I think, available. And again, you have to respect team season still ongoing. That's just the tricky part about what you're in the midst of right now. Is coaches pour themselves into their team and all that, and then it's the height of the pressure, and this is win or go home. And so you're trying to respect all that, but also if you got 30 minutes or an hour, we'd love to visit with you. Yeah, it's going to have to wait. I mean, who the heck knows before, after, all those things. But I'd be willing to bet there's already conversations that have taken place. Again, preliminary, probably laying the groundwork, kind of wanting to see, hey, do we want to follow up? Do we want
sure.
see what the deal is here. But that, could be all the above of what you just described.
Before we move on to the player aspect and portal and NIL dollars and things like that, I was curious. Me personally, just as a Tech fan, Grant McCaslin at North Texas, I think, has gotten most of my attention. I know nothing other than what he's done as a basketball coach, and that he's obviously made a short list of those that would seem like viable candidates. He's the one that personally, as a fan, has just gotten, I think, most of my attention. Chris, anybody that stuck out to you, either as a fan or analyst, that you really feel like, man, I keep coming back to this name? Not that it's anything you're hearing from administrators or from any, kind of executive level, but just as a fan, Chris level, is there a name or a couple of names that you just can't keep coming back to?
Well, you know what I come back to is, and this doesn't answer your question, but this is, if you're asking me, I'm just being honest. I come back to the unknown. I come back to who is out there that is interested, or that they may be looking at that we just don't know, or whose name hasn't been tossed around. And so when I see a new name,
field, I guess. Yeah.
Well, kind of that is intriguing to me.
Yeah,
and it's nothing against the names that have been listed, some of which I know, some of which I don't know. I'll just speak to Grant a bit. In many ways, his resume is very similar to like Beard's was. And I say that he won, I think, a championship, or spent a lot of time at Odessa College. I think he's been at Midwestern State. I think he's been at Baylor. He's now at North Texas. I mean, so he's hovered around all levels, and he's been around this neck of the woods in the state of Texas, and obviously spent time.
That's big to me.
Yeah,
Chris,
spent time.
State familiarity. I don't know why. That's just me, but I really want to hammer on somebody that's had a presence in Texas for a significant period of time, and success, obviously.
Yeah, and I think that people are that they have a lot of respect for Grant. I mean, I obviously, NIT bound this year, and maybe that's a knock. People are like, man, you haven't been to the tournament enough. I know people have said that about Andy Kennedy and all those things. Again, there's a variety of things. What is most important to you? Like if you're making this decision, is it what do we have to pay? How well can you recruit? Past success, potential future success based on what? How do you work the portal? How much of a fit personality wise do we think we will get from you here in Lubbock, Texas, with this fan base and all those things? I mean, all those are different. So I don't know what is most important to the committee, and obviously it stands to reason you'd like them to check all those boxes, but I just don't know. Is it important that so and so has a clean history? That there's no baggage there. There is no incident. There's no NCAA issues. It's like because Sean Miller is a name right now. Xavier is obviously rolling. They're a 3 seed. I don't think there's any connections with Lubbock or Texas Tech or anything like that based on Sean Miller, but his name has been tossed around a lot. And obviously he had some issues there at University of Arizona. I had somebody that I talked to tell me yesterday, hey man, as long as you don't get fired for losing, you're going to get rehired. It's when you get
There's
fired.
Your brass tacks.
Yeah, it's when you get fired for losing that it's like, we're out. But anything else, man, you're gonna get another bite at the apple.
I just feel like, Chris, there's so many options out there without previous infraction issues. Let's go get somebody that doesn't have them. Let's make our own infraction issue memories together. We can create new ones together. Let's start fresh. We don't have to find somebody that's already done it with somebody else. Come on down. Maybe we can create our own and win simultaneously at the same time. Maybe the FBI will want to know what's going on in our basketball program someday. We'll be so damn good. Come on down. Come on down. I think what you just said there is absolutely on the money, and so many fans are aware of it, and probably, at least speaking personally, trying to balance how they feel about it, about the possibility. I touched on this on an episode a couple of days ago, the possibility that you do kind of wind up in this circle where you're thinking, All right. Well, I see this bullet point on his resume. Maybe we won't repeat that here at Texas Tech. But yes, the win-loss record is very nice. So maybe we'll repeat that at Texas Tech. All right. Appreciate the thoughts on the leadership front. Now let's get to the player angle, Chris, because we actually have some news here in Lubbock player-wise, but also want to get to a bigger picture perspective that I thought was really interesting. You mentioned as it relates to the transfer portal and now the obligation, dare I say obligation, that could come with NIL dollars being a part of that decision being made. We'll get to all of the above coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you by America's #1 sports book, FanDuel. And now is the perfect time to download the FanDuel app. Become a new customer because new customers get that no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't hit. So just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today. Safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line, point scores, 3 points drained if basketball is your thing, or all points in between, underwater basket weaving, anyone. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with that same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thanks for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Always appreciate you being out there. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't so far, so you never miss an episode. Thanks for making us your first listen, and hope you will check out Locked On College Basketball's bracket breakdown for your second listen. National analysis, insights from local experts. The Locked On College Basketball bracket breakdown has got everything you need to make the most informed decisions on your bracket. Find the episode on Locked On College Basketball's podcast, wherever you get podcasts, or on YouTube. Chris, we were talking coaching just a moment ago as it relates to Texas Tech's outlook on what's happened so far, what could be soon to come, maybe on the other side of a weekend. You'll have some, obviously, seasons ending here or there that could change some timelines for conversations, I suppose. But on a player front, I want to get to a bigger picture conversation as it relates to the portal and NIL dollars. But first, did get an announcement this week from a Red Raider. They were entering the transfer portal, that being Robert Jennings. He explicitly states within his announcement that Texas Tech is still an option on the other side to remain a Red Raider. You don't have any men in suits employed by your basketball program right now, so it's hard, I think, for a player of any kind to invest in something or recommit to something until that kind of thing happens. So not shocking to see these kinds of announcements, as you've alluded to before, heading into this week. But what did you make of Robert Jennings' announcement, a guy who I think did show some progress as the season came along?
Yeah, what is interesting about Jennings' announcement is that, I think we were kind of wondering if there would be many announcements. And now his announcement kind of, in a weird way, stands alone. And so yeah. I think that is interesting to note. But we'll just talk about Robert. He's a guy I wouldn't have. Let's just, for example, say that the staff would have remained in place that was in place this year and would have coached next year. I wouldn't have been surprised at all if Robert Jennings would have left to seek more playing time elsewhere, just because here's what Robert Jennings is. Robert Jennings is really young, but Robert Jennings is a very high character piece that I think eventually is a piece that you would love. That the eventually part is the tricky that's the tricky one there, because how long will it take to realize some of that? But I think he showed flashes like a lot of these freshmen did. I think there's still a chance that he would come back. He is tied to, I'll just leave it at that, he's tied to some of the people that we mentioned earlier in this show in some ways. And I think that is important to note. I'll just kind of leave that to Robert Jennings and those people, but that could mean he's back here or not back here based on kind of who he is got relationships with and all those things. But if you look at, because I had somebody tell me, really surprised that he did it. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I was kind of thinking a lot of these guys would. And they're like, you got 2 months in the portal. Like you should just wait until you see what happens here. And if it doesn't go well, then you enter the portal. Because right now, somebody like Robert Jennings, he's probably heard from 20 to 25 institutions. I mean, some of which may be very serious about adding him. Some of which are, maybe, hey, we're just checking in, just want us to get in touch with you, whatever. Yeah. But and they're from all over. I mean, you can go look on social media and see his list that has been reported. I mean, there's like 20 to 25 schools. And so you just put yourself through a lot, everybody tugging and pulling at you, your phone blowing up and all those things. And you could have kind of hit pause for a second if you could have waited, because this portal window is it stays open until May the 11th. And here we are, you and I are sitting here talking on March the 15th. So they've got plenty of time. I just was thinking along the lines of, you want to get your name out there so you can keep all options open. But I mean, maybe I misthought that, is at least the way a lot of the coaches out there have kind of thought about it. Like, I'm surprised that he did that. And the reason, Calvin, the reason that he's one of the few that could do it and with no ramifications is he doesn't have any kind of NIL deal right now. And I think that's we can get into that too, but that's important to note as well.
Yeah, let's go ahead and pivot in that direction. And I'd love to have, I think, Robert Jennings back in the mix. He was a part of that group of 4 young guys that played a significant amount of minutes. He wasn't the flashiest, obviously, of that group. If you're talking about, guys like Isaacs or Washington or even Elijah Fisher. But yeah, I was a little surprised also there wasn't a little more company, I guess, for him in the portal. I don't know if him and other Red Raiders were like holding hands at the side of the pool and they're like, all right, guys, we're all going in on 3, 1, 2, 3. And then boom, Robert's in. The rest of the guys are still standing on the concrete. But I was a little surprised about that as well. But I thought he showed some progress, and I'm interested in his future. Wouldn't mind it remaining as a Red Raider. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, let's pivot to this NIL aspect of transfer portal entry. Yeah, let's pivot to this NIL aspect of transfer portal entry. A moment ago, I used the word obligation. I feel like the NCAA police force is outside my door, even using things that could refer to employment obligations and things like that. So this is a very illegal conversation to even have in the eyes of the NCAA, Chris. But should I use the word obligation, or how does now NIL agreements, NIL dollars affect someone's ability to make these portal decisions one way or another? Because I know there's some kind of tricky gray areas, if you will, as it relates to like performance incentives or contract terms and timelines. So how are you processing this?
Yeah, I think I think that this is fairly standard across the country. At most places, I can't say, that everybody's situation is exactly the same, but I think that what we're about to get into is fairly standard. And that if you have an NIL deal at an institution, football, basketball, whatever it may be, track and field, on and on, I think that it is, you're good to go. Unless if you enter into the portal, okay, I think that at that point, a lot of these NIL deals become null and void. And so whatever you have going, whether it's revenue, whether it's, somewhere you live or what you drive, or whatever you've worked up or whatever is being, you're being compensated with or you've bartered with or whatever it may be, I think that it goes away and becomes null and void once you enter the portal. I think that is fairly standard. And so that's why, again, I don't think like Robert Jennings or like a guy like Lamar Washington or a DeMarion Williams, there's nothing there that would prohibit them from entering the portal. I don't think they had any kind of NIL deal here, just kind of localizing it, talking about Texas Tech. But I think others do, and others would like. I think Fardaws is a prime example. He's in the portal. I think that I think that there's things that he's no longer, involved with, immediately upon returning back to Lubbock. I think that, the story is the story's been told a lot last year about TJ Shannon. I think that TJ Shannon last year entered the portal, like before we even got home from San Francisco. And I think that there was a car back here that he was driving as part of an NIL agreement that didn't work upon his arrival back in Lubbock, or was
People lose cars at the airport all the time, Chris. This is just another variety of losing a car at the airport, I guess.
Yeah. So anyway,
I think Big Maple had to ride back in the cargo hold of the plane after you tweeted so quickly. But that to me is really interesting because I don't know if you even have the answer to this, but there's so many unknowns as far as consequences of NIL that we're still, kind of learning as time passes. But one of the things I think is interesting about that is it just like, hey, anytime you make the announcement, this is coming to an end, I wonder, is there like some term where it's like, you've got till here and then you're kind of, I don't know, a free agent? I don't even know how to describe these situations because I know that there are things that you can't, include in these agreements as far as, I guess, holding someone to something, which sounds crazy to say when we're talking about contracts. But we're also talking about the NCAA and student athletes and things like that. So do you think it's just like at any hour you announce this comes to an end? Do you have any concept of like, is there a window, like they have some deadline, this is when your contract ends or anything like that?
Well, most of this stuff goes month to month, I think. And I think that it's, pretty standard that if you have an agreement, at an institution and, that's institution based or whatever. Again, this will be different if you've got a national, or something, but if it's, institution based or if it's, localized where you're at and it's specific to that, I think, hey, we're good. And then, but if you ever get into the portal, like we're done. We go our separate ways and all those things. As far as the agreement goes, I think that's fairly standard, but I think it's immediate. I think that that's just, because at that point you're that athlete's best interest is not, the situation here. They're obviously talking to other folks and they're likely to potentially leave. And so I just think, that's pretty, and again, I think everybody knows the score there on all that. Everybody knows the deal. And that's why I think, Elijah Fisher, he's got an NIL deal here. And I think that there was a lot of people on his behalf that went out of his way to indicate, no, we have not gotten into the portal. Like we have not. That's just me guessing.
Yes.
That's me guessing there. But I think it's not a big reach there that they were, everybody was going out of their way to indicate, no, I'm not in that portal, or anything like that. So.
Mama's at the furniture store. We ain't got out of the portal. We're checking out a sectional right now. Hey, make sure they know we're not in the portal. Yeah. That's really interesting. And I'm conflicted on how I even process it, Chris, because I know a lot of folks, maybe plenty of college sports fans out there, have no sympathy for those involved with NIL as far as contributors like businesses or whatever. Like, you don't expect to really get anything out of it. And like that even matters, by the way. It's their money and do whatever they want to with it. They want to play college basketball general manager, they can play college basketball general manager, whatever. But just because they're involved in such a risky venture doesn't mean they deserve to be taken to the cleaners over it. So on one hand, I'm glad there's some accountability for the investor, so to speak. And I don't, accountability is the wrong word, but I'm glad there's some protection, I guess, or, like a normal contract to where a guy just can't, take off and maybe continue to get that cash coming his way. I'm glad for that, I suppose. At the same time, I know there are a lot of college fans that are still having trouble coming to grips with the thought of these arrangements even being there. And you're afraid of the word employee or things like contracts or obligations as it relates to money and remaining a part of a program. It's hard to process. I'm conflicted on all the above, but it does sound like maybe there is a little bit more accountability, I guess I should say, for that student athlete to remain committed to whatever that deal is that's been struck, at least for some period of time. Of course, they still can bail with the understanding, I suppose, at any hour, hey, this is getting cut off, but, you can walk away. It's just, it is the Wild West if there's ever been a time to say something is the Wild West. I feel like we say that all the time when it comes to college sports, Chris, but this really is. I mean, there are so many unintended consequences and things, as I said a moment ago, left to learn about consequences of the way that this has been set up, at least to this point. And man, wildly entertaining for those of us, I think, observing from afar and taking it all in. So interesting perspective there, man. I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, and something obviously to keep an eye on as you process who's there and maybe who isn't putting their name within that ring just yet. Enjoyed the conversation as always, Chris. Thanks for the time, man.
Keep hope alive, man. We'll do it again.
You got it. And subscribe on YouTube if you haven't so far, so you never miss an episode as we remain in a fluid state looking for a head coach. Thanks for making us your first listen each day on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts, and make Locked On College Basketball your second listen right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your one-stop college hoops shop. Whether your team is in the tournament, whether your team is not in the tournament, Locked On College Basketball is where you need to be throughout the month of March and beyond, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make Locked On College Basketball your second listen. He's Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Join us once again for the next round next time on Locked On Texas Tech.